Isabella Guzman was born June of 1995 in Aurora, Colorado, with her mother, Yeonmi Hoy, and father, Robert Guzman. Her parents were married when she was born, and both owned a photography studio. But the relationship eventually dissolved, and the two divorced, which led to Yeonmi getting married sometime after to a man named Ryan Hoy. Although the couple was no longer together, they both continued to work in the studio and maintain a cordial co-parenting relationship. But even with the cordial relationship between the two parents, they were unprepared for the trouble that they would face with their little bundle of joy. It's unclear if their divorce had an effect on their daughter Isabel, but even as a young child, they had trouble with her. That only got worse as she got older. Isabella and her mother had the hardest time getting along, most likely due to her being with her mother the majority of the time. But there was a point when Isabella went to live with her father, Robert, which her mother was hoping that this would help things, but it didn't. Things only got worse, and Isabella eventually went back home to her mother's house. As a teenager, Isabella was known for rebelling against her parents and was not the greatest student while attending Overland High School in Colorado, and she eventually dropped out. She was not home a lot, but when she was home, it was usually at night, and she was also known for getting caught sneaking people in and out of her home in the middle of the night. There were times she would come and work in the studio with her parents, but she was unhappy doing that as well. It was said by her father that Yeonmi was very hardworking and did everything that she could for Isabella. But Isabella never appreciated what her mother did for her and resented her the majority of the time for their low-income lifestyle. Isabella would fight with her mother often, and fights would get worse and worse every time. It got worse to the point to where Isabella started threatening her mother through text messages. Yeonmi eventually contacted the police after receiving some of the messages, but nothing was done due to the fact that she never acted on the threats that she had made. But all that changed on the evening of August 28, 2013. At around 10 p.m., Ryan was in the living room watching TV and eating dinner, when Yeonmi was upstairs preparing to take a shower before going to bed, and Isabella was thought to have been in her room. This was after earlier that day when another fight between Isabella and her mother took place, but had died down after a few hours, and eventually became a pretty routine night for the family. Suddenly, Ryan heard a loud noise come from upstairs that alarmed him enough to where he immediately jumped up and headed upstairs. But he was unprepared for what he was about to witness. When reaching the bathroom door, it was originally open, where he was able to slightly see Isabella standing there in the bathroom with her mother. But Isabella immediately slammed the door shut before Ryan could come in. On the opposite side of the door, Ryan heard his wife Yeonmi's muffled screams as Isabella, her own daughter, was attacking her, stabbing her with a knife. He ran downstairs at one point to grab his phone and call the police. And when he returned back, the screams started to die down to the point of nothing. Not long after this, Isabella opened the door and revealed Yeonmi's lifeless body, full of blood, on the bathroom floor, while she stood beside it. Ryan braced himself, in shock, not knowing what Isabella was going to do next. But ultimately, with a blank look on her face, she exited the bathroom, almost as if nothing had just happened, as Ryan tried to help Yeonmi, but it was too late. Isabella stabbed her mother a reported 79 times, 31 stabs to the face, and 48 stabs to the neck. Isabella left the house in her vehicle, with no one knowing where she was headed. After the police arrived, they quickly put an APB for Isabella, but they had no clue of where she had gone. They only knew that she left her in her car, as she was when she left the house. Eventually, the search for her hit the news and advised for anyone that came across her to be careful and immediately call the police. Isabella was captured the next morning when it was reported to the police that there was a woman that was sleeping in a car in a parking lot, still covered in her mother's blood. When arrested, she was taken to the hospital and was tested for mental illness and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Isabella was still charged with the murder of her mother. While on trials, her attorneys submitted a plea of insanity due to her mental illness. They stated that Isabella spoke to hearing voices her whole life, and it was the voices that made her take the life of her mother. The plea of insanity was accepted, and Isabella Guzman was acquitted and was submitted to Pueblo Psychiatric Hospital in Colorado.